Camilla Casonato, professor at Politecnico di Milano, and I'm here with my colleague Paola Branduini. Buongiorno, Paola. Good morning.
Good morning, Camilla.
We invited Tremeur Denigot, education expert of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, to speak about the European policies and initiatives concerning the education for the green transition, and to consider also the possible connections between green education and landscape education. Welcome, Mr. Denigot. Thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
So let's start. In the last years, the European Union has improved its support for the education and training sector to act for a more sustainable future. Now, we would like to better know the European framework for green education. First of all, could you please briefly define what the education for the green transition is?
So I will try. So let me start from the beginning. As a matter of fact, the European Union is encouraging and supporting the education and training sector to take action for a greener, more sustainable future and build the sustainability competences. It does that, and I got to say that from the beginning because I think it's important. It does that with due regard to a subsidiarity on national circumstances. And that's important because, as you know, education is not of European competence and responsibility. The European Union has got various competences, from exclusive to, for instance, competences to support. And if you take, for instance, exclusive competence, if I give you an example, it's custom union, for instance, or monetary policy. When it comes to competence to support member states, education is part of it. Another thing I can add is that that priority the European Union has regarding education for sustainability is also one of the European education area, which was, there was a communication on September 2020 on the European education area. And among the various objectives of the European education area, you got the digital and green transition. So here again, we have to find ways to support an education that fits that target of the green transition. But everything really started from the Green Deal. When the new commission was elected, most of the European policies that were designed in the frame of the new Green Deal. So a set of European policies, of course, that will give a possibility for the European Union to ensure that transition and to adapt industry, but also society, of course. So from the very beginning, it was absolutely obvious that if we wanted, and we want, to adapt the society to the needs of the green transition, education would play a role. And I think it's important to remind that in the official text and the first communication on the Green Deal, there was already a mention on education, even if subsidiarity applies. So let me quote that because I've just noted down two quotes. It's about schools, training institutions, and universities being well placed to engage with pupils, parents, and the wider community on the changes needed for a successful transition. That was written in the communication. And it was about, and that's the most important thing really, proactive reskilling and upskilling that are necessary, of course, to reap the benefits of the ecological transition. So you understand that from the very beginning, the green transition was taking into consideration the need to activate, in a way, the education and training sector to give the possibility for European citizens to reskill and upskill, and of course, for not just the job market, by the way, but of course also for the job market. So that's it. Then the second way to, and I'm a bit long maybe, but to answer your question is that we all know that we are talking at the end of the day about education for sustainable development, but it's a matter of definition, which is different from one institution to the other. And for almost 40 years now, UNESCO has been, the UN has been talking about education for sustainable development. Climate education is a part of education for sustainable development, So we've decided at EU level, and that's also the name of the Council recommendation dedicated to that topic, to talk about learning for the green transition, because it fits that frame that I've explained before. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's the same thing. Let's be frank.
It's a complex frame, composite. Thank you. It's very clear now. Let's talk now about the European strategies for green transition. In 2022, the Council of Europe released a special recommendation for teachers and educators. Could you tell us something about this relevant document?
Absolutely, but maybe I will start first by, as a link between the first question and the second one, explain very briefly the various tools and instruments we have at EU level to support the green transitions with education. And basically, the first thing is what you just spoken about, which is a political tool, and we need political tools, especially because, again, education is not of European competence, but we still can have tools inviting member states to converge towards common objectives. And this is precisely the objective of a council recommendation. So we got to that now, huh? And I'm going to say a couple of words about that later on. So it has been adopted last summer, 2023. But we also design and define some, I should say, methodological tool in a way to frame the competences. So for instance, the competence framework, and I know that we're going to talk about that also later on. Green Comp is a competence framework on sustainability, and we need that. And then obviously we've got financial tools that are obviously very important at European level to incentivize green education. So in particular, Horizon, of course, projects on the Erasmus Plus project. But we can also, and that's what we do also, provide some dedicated research on various research. There's also a working group, for instance, that was set up by the DG in charge of education, the DG EAC, as we call it, dealing specifically with schools on learning for sustainability, where you have experts coming from all the member states who are sharing information and they're producing recommendations on white papers in order to invite also and to help, to support, to inspire the education community at large on green education. And finally, there's also a last tool that has been developed recently in the frame of the Erasmus Plus program, which are the Erasmus Plus Teachers Academy. And they are experts and teachers gathering together and working on various given topics. And there are 3 at the moment, fully dedicated to green education. And there's a new call that has just been launched in February for 16 new Teachers Academy that will also help greening education in a way. But let me now focus on the Council recommendation. I think it's an interesting document. First, we needed it. We needed it because it's a document where we have 27 member states telling to themselves, in a way, what they should do in order to strengthen our capacities regarding sustainable education. And the first thing I want to quote, because to my view, it's one of the basic, really, it's the second recommendation in that Council recommendation, but maybe the most important one. It goes like that: establish learning for the green transition on sustainable development as one of the priority areas in education and training policies and programs in order to support and enable the sector to contribute to a sustainable future embedded in a holistic understanding of education. You've got almost everything there. You understand that it's about considering that sustainable education is a priority, which is, of course, a very important political decision, but also to work on programs and on policies with a holistic understanding of education. And that is very interesting and very important, because we need to understand from the very beginning that when it comes to green education, you need to have a whole institution approach and to understand that we're talking about something which is by nature, by definition, fully transversal. So it's not possible to consider that as a box, if you want, and then you put what you need to put in that box, as you have a box on, I don't know, history and mathematics. When it comes to sustainable education, you need, by definition, to think transversally. And that makes things more complicated, but it's also the only way really to get where we want to get. So the document, I invite, of course, all the people listening to read carefully the document. It might sound like a boring, official document, but it's interesting in the way it has been conceived. On the recommendation, the very recommendations it contains that are not just, about making priority and things like that, making, of course, investing in green education, obviously. There are a set of recommendations that are going into the details of what should be done for member states, so at system level, I should say, but also for educators, also for formal and non-formal education, and also for institutions. So it's interesting, and also for the European Commission. So it means that there's a long list of various recommendations for various targets. And let me quote just a few. At the level of a system, for instance, of course, it's about curricula, investment, awareness, cooperation, etc. You will see, of course, it's about investment, for instance. It's very important. But when it comes to support learners, and then one would consider, oh yeah, I mean, there won't be a recommendation about the learners because it's a level of detail which is too high for such a document. And it's not the case, which is what, to my view, it's super interesting. They say this, for instance, because of course I won't say the list of various measures because you just have to read the text. But one in particular, to my view, is super interesting and will explain why that document is really interesting. It says, it goes like that. So it's about facilitating learning methods and approaches that are collaborative, experiential, practically oriented, and relevant to local context and traditions, and about supporting interdisciplinary and cross-curricular activities. I will stop there, it goes on. So you see, it's not only about telling the member states or the member state telling themselves, we should do more and we should invest more. It's also about considering what it entails when it comes to the teaching and learning process itself. And as it's something which is transverse, green education is, as I said before, by nature transversal. It's also about really considering or reconsidering new ways of doing things by investing much more on experiential learning, project-based learning, for instance, interdisciplinary approach. And then from there, you understand immediately that, of course, at system level, if you want to adapt and to tackle these challenges, you need to change, of course, the way education system and training system are considering teaching and learning and are organized. So this is why it's very ambitious in a way, but it's also very, very interesting. And also because, and that's something I used to say here and there, but it's really something I really believed in, is that we need more than ever cooperation. And this is also one of the main objectives of such a document, to say we need to learn from each other. We need to share good practices. We need to look at what's happening in Italy, in France, in Romania, or whatever, because we are all facing the same problem at the same moment. And this is something really of historical proportion, because education and training system are facing challenges always, of course, depending on the regional or national context. But the fact that you have all education and training systems at the same moment facing the same needs and challenges, this is something which is really interesting and requires, obviously, more than ever, coordination and cooperation. So I will stop here. And I just, about cooperation, because I think it will be a good link, of course, for an incoming question. The Education for Climate Coalition that you can see behind me is part of the instruments that have been set up precisely to support that required cooperation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denigot, for your word. And listening to you, it becomes clear that teachers and education are entrusted with a very important and complex task. So to support them, it seems necessary to first define what skills are needed for sustainability. Is it true? What do you think about it?
I fully agree with you. And first of all, as a matter of fact, teachers need to be supported because they are doing a very complex task, as you said before, rightly. But they are the ones who are on the ground, acting on the ground, are first in the front. And when it comes to of course, learning and developing new skills. So it's super important to give them all the support we can. So the idea of framing and defining the specificities of the competences that are linked to sustainability is not new. It's something that has been tackled by various institutions and various countries. Unfortunately, we don't have a sort of universal framework. I don't even know, to tell the truth, it's a good idea to have a universal framework. But it was an excellent idea for the institutions, and that was, by the way, written black and white in the Green Deal communication back in 2019 already. We need to, at EU level, we needed to have a competence framework that could serve as an inspiration for all the the member states. So that was developed. So it's called officially the European Sustainability Competence Framework, for short, Green Comp, for green competences. It's not very original. And it was released at the beginning of 2023, the same year when the Council recommendation was adopted, because it was accompanying the Council recommendation. And I mean, personally, I must say I like it very much. I think it's a very interesting document, and it generates a lot of interest also in the education community, and it has been already used and reused and adapted, because and that's something I should say from the very beginning. It's a conceptual framework, so it means that you use it the way you want to use it, of course, and you can adapt it depending, of course, on your needs. So basically, what it does, it defines 12 competences that are organized under 4 main group of competences. That's the first thing to understand. So the 4 themes, if you want, of these large competence areas are about, if I make it easier to understand, about values. It's called embodying sustainability values. The second one is about, as you said before, complexity, because that's it. I mean, we have to deal with complexity, and that requires specific competences. So embracing complexity in sustainability, that's the name. The third one is about envisioning future, so envisioning sustainable future. And here again, there are very interesting competences that we have to develop to give that possibility of envisioning future. And the fourth one is about action, acting for sustainability. And I won't go into the detail, because again, you can have a direct access to a Green Comp and learn how to use it. But it's, first of all, very interesting to see that, of course, it's based on the competence approach, competence-based approach, which is, to my view, more than ever needed, and especially when it comes to sustainability, and especially when AI is coming. Knowledge is very important, but it's not just about knowledge, and that's something I should have defined from the beginning. The competence framework Green Comp starts from a definition of competence. I'm going to really talk about competence and not skills, which is an ensemble of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So these are the competences. Of course, I have to learn new knowledge, specific knowledge linked to sustainability. That's obvious. But I've got also to develop specific skills and also adapt my behavior to have the right attitudes. And then you've got Green Comp. So it's about, for instance, I give you an example. It's certainly about systems thinking, which is, to my view, one of the most important competence, which is my own personal view, because another thing I should have said is that there are no order. There is no hierarchy among these competences. All are as important as the other one. And you have to deal with all these competences to develop sustainability competence. But systems thinking is definitely an interesting one, because if you want to develop systems thinking in a school, and this is one of your target, and you are a history teacher, like I used to be, for instance, if I want to talk about sustainability and give that possibility to my students to develop systems thinking, I can't just stick to history. I've got to work with my geography colleague, and I've got to work with my biology colleague. So immediately you see that how tackling in education such a competence framework with this definition invites me as an educator to work really on an interdisciplinary basis. So I think that's very interesting. Another one, for instance, is political agency. to develop the possibilities for the learner to be fully an agent acting in society, but working on developing individual initiatives, but also being able to work on at collective level. So you see, it's I will stop here because I could talk forever about it, but it's an interesting, really competence framework. So the last thing I wanted to say, and it will be, I think, a good transition, is that there was in the pipeline a year ago the idea to develop a dedicated community of practice to invite users interested in green competences to talk about and to work around Green Comp. And it has been developed, it exists now, and it's hosted within the Education for Climate Coalition. So it means that teachers, but students, academics are invited to join such a community if they're interested in implementing on competence framework and using Green Comp.
So it is very clear that the European institutions are providing important tools, and not only political tools, but also that can support the work of educators. However, education is an open and collective process, I think, isn't it? Then how can teachers, educators, but also experts offer their contributions to define useful methodologies and practices for green education? Maybe that the Climate Coalition community can help them to accomplish this task.
I hope so. So that's something. When the Green Deal was written, and when then the European education area was the communication on the European education area was provided, was the idea, as a matter of fact, to develop Education for Climate Coalition. So we have been now working for 3 years on designing, on co-designing with people like you, with academics, with researchers, with teachers, with students, with people coming from NGOs, associations, with scientists, a community of practice with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, where I work, which is, to make it short, the scientific department, if you want, of the European Commission, where you have researchers and experts who are developing science to back up and support the European policies. And we do that together with the DG, of course, the Director General in charge of education, which is the DG EAC. And it was a very interesting journey, I must say, because it's something which is new. Huh? You said before, I understood, Camilla, that you were saying that, as a matter of fact, I mean, the European Commission, of course, is used to propose financial tools. That's something you are used as an academic, Erasmus, Horizon project you apply to. But the idea that we offer also something which is not a policy, not a rule, not a framework, not a financial scheme, but a community of practice, something which is rather new. And the idea behind that is precisely the fact, as you said before, that we need to cooperate more than ever. So the idea is, but that's something you use too as researchers and academics, but it's maybe less the case at other level of education in secondary and primary. We need to work together. It's as simple as that. We come from different horizons, from different cultural background. We have the various on different education, on training landscapes, on organizations, ways of doing things. But as we are facing, as I said before, the same challenges at the same moment, we need to engage in a conversation, but it is more than a conversation. First, a conversation, of course, because we need to share information and ideas, but even more, to try to co-create solutions together. And there, a community of practice can be a very interesting tool, which is in a way also a new way of maybe considering policymaking process, where you have also people involved in designing and implementing policy, but are meeting practitioners acting on the ground. And we need both of these people to design policies that have a greater impact and are more efficient in a way. So the Education for Climate Coalition, in a nutshell, is that. We've got a tagline. We used to say that this is the European participatory community to support teaching and learning for the green transition and sustainable development. That being said, and you see behind me the online collaborative platform we use. It's a place, it's a community, but it's not a place precisely. It's a community of people, because this is what it is about, of individuals who decide to join the community on an individual basis. So the first thing here to make it very clear is that if you're coming from Europe, and of course the majority is coming from Europe, which is absolutely normal, because as a European Commission, we offer and support first a tool for Europeans. But if you come from another country, you're welcome. And we engage we were using, of course, a tool, but I mean, it's important to keep in mind that the tool is a tool. So the community is not limited, of course, to that tool, but we need a tool, and we have an online collaborative platform where we can meet and engage and share all what you want. And you're welcome, because it's about really empowering people. So we are not there to do what we're going to tell them to do. I mean, this is your community, and you make what you want out of it. So you can share events, share projects or whatever, but you can also engage in co-creation processes. We call it community challenges. Another thing we do, and we believe in, is that we don't limit ourselves, of course, to the exchange of the platform. We meet the community members on a very frequent basis, so as to be able to shed light on various projects and to engage based on then to share, of course, ideas and get inspired by what's happening in the various countries. Let me tell you that at the moment, in terms of green education, I've started to work 3 years ago on that project, and I was arriving in a landscape that was already complex, certainly, but I'm impressed to see how many projects were born just during that period. Meaning that there's a sort of explosion, and that was clearly the case following the pandemic, an explosion of initiatives and proposals in all the member states. And now the landscape is super complex. So it's also very important to map out what's existing out there, because most of the case, one of the worst difficulty in a way is for people to know what's happening, even sometimes for national administration, I must say, because the teachers sometimes they are not even sharing what they're doing. So it's amazing, really, to see the level of innovation and inventivity varies, and we need, so more than ever again, to look what's happening and to try to use, of course, and to select the best practices. So this is what we're doing. So let's take an example. You want to develop a MOOC at Politecnico. You will do that, of course, but you might, in the development of your tool, for instance, need a support. You're seeking for support because you want to test something, or maybe you tell yourself, I don't know why, but you would be very much interested to try to test it in Spain or whatever. I mean, such a community can give you that possibility of a sort of transnational cooperation around a common goal, which is supporting and developing, strengthening our capacities in green learning and teaching.
So you just introduced landscape, and so would like to focus on landscape definition of the European Landscape Convention. Landscape means an area as perceived by people whose character is the result of the action and interaction of natural and human factor. And especially the convention calls for education, particularly the construction of school and university curricula dealing with landscape values and its preservation, management and planning that are so important. What, in your opinion, are the possible connections between landscape and green education? Also with a view to nurturing young Europeans towards active and responsible citizenship.
Thank you. So, I mean, the link is quite obvious, I should say. I'm not an expert in cultural heritage, but I mean, it's obvious that when it comes on, I was referring to GreenCom before, I was referring to the Council recommendation, and reading these documents, you will immediately understand how it's really fully connected. As you know, there was also an open method of coordination that was launched on strengthening cultural heritage resilience for climate change. And there again, you can see the connection that are very interesting. You remember that the Council recommendation was talking about, for instance, the possibility to give learners hands-on opportunities to observe and care for nature. Green Comp, one of the key competencies in Green Comp under the competence area embodying sustainability values is about promoting nature. And if I read promoting nature, it says embodying sustainability values is about advocating equity and justice for current and future generations, while supporting the view that humans are part of nature. And when it comes to the competence under that area, promoting nature is about acknowledging that humans are part of nature and to respect the needs and rights of our species and of the nature itself in order to restore and regenerate healthy and resilient ecosystems. So having an education that has a strong focus on landscape and remind the learners that is part of nature and that caring about cultural heritage and landscapes at large is key in terms of facing and envisioning a more sustainable future. I mean, it seems obvious to my view. So my first answer to your question would be certainly that there are links and that they've got to be absolutely strengthened. Then, of course, for what regards the details of what has to be done, I mean, I'm not an expert and I won't dare to give you some specific answers to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all these all these insights. Maybe Paola wanted to add something, or no? I thought that you wanted to add something, but this talk was very rich, and I think that it emerged a connection, very strong connection between green education and landscape education, but also with heritage. Cultural heritage education. And I also think that in this discourse, we can find some contents that were already in the Cultural Heritage Education Recommendation from 1998. Was from Europe, and the need to an active methodology, participation, community-based learning, and active methods and transversal approach are all topics that are common between these different domains that maybe are not so different, but this is just a suggestion. And maybe you want to add something.
I would just finish by inviting the people who are listening to us to join the community, because the very nice thing when you do a MOOC is that you want a follow-up, of course. So you will give a follow-up, I'm sure. But if they want to follow up also the discussion and bring in that community the very topic of cultural heritage and find for supports and for partners at transnational level, that community is for them. I'm not important here. It's about the community members, and there are amazing people in that community, really. So come join and work with your partners at transnational level.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tremeur Denigot. It's always a pleasure to discuss with you, and thank you for your great support to this talk and to this process that is very, very relevant for us, isn't it?
Yes, thank you for your so inspiring conversation that can help us to engage in active citizenship, of course, and education.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.